fitness finely dream. All the fitness he requires is to feel your need of him. This he gives you. This he gives you. 'Tis the Spirit's rising beam. Love incarnate, God ascended, please the merit of his blood. Venture on him, venture holy, let no other trust in truth. None but Jesus, none but Jesus can do helpless sinners good. None but Jesus. None but Jesus. None but Jesus can do helpless sinners good.
All right, have a seat. I don't know if you know this or not, a little church history lesson for you. You're going to get a little bit of that tonight. Hope that's okay. For about 1,000 years, congregations didn't sing in church. A lot of people don't know this. The Council of Laodicea, which is AD 365, banned congregational singing. And we're not sure how long it took before that was fully enforced all over Christendom, but for about 1,000 years, congregations didn't sing. Singing was restricted to trained choirs of priests, and people went to church and just watched what happened. It's actually not a new problem. It's a current problem, of course, where people come into church and they got the lights down low and the band real loud and the congregation feels like an audience, but it's actually a really old problem. It's been going on for a long time. Well, John Huss, in the early 1400s, tried to reintroduce congregational singing. Matter of fact, we have a Hussite hymn book still in existence from 1509, which is 8 years before Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses on the church door at Wittenberg, okay? John Huss tried to reintroduce congregational singing along with some other reforms. The church didn't appreciate it, called him to answer for his errors at a place called the Council of Constance, and burned him at the stake. Burned him at the stake while he was singing the Te Deum, which is an ancient Christian hymn. Well, Martin Luther, about a century later, was able to reintroduce congregational singing. A lot of people don't know this. When Martin Luther went to Wittenberg, the Reformation began 1517 when he nailed the 95 Theses, but it's been well said that the Reformation really took root in 1523, which is when they published the first hymnal in Wittenberg. It had 8 hymns in it. 8 hymns, but it was a start. Martin Luther wrote this in the preface to that hymnal. He said, "In order to make a start and to give an incentive to those who can do better, I have, with the help of others, compiled several hymns so that the holy gospel, which now by the grace of God has arisen anew, may be noised and spread abroad." It's a very Luther thing to say. That's what we're doing tonight. We're noising and spreading the gospel abroad. 8 hymns, but it was a start. The next edition of the hymnal, published later that year, had 25 hymns. I guess, how many? 18 of them were Luther's out of the 25. And I always think about that when I think about Indelible Grace because, you know, we were doing some of these songs from about 1995 when I got out of seminary till we put out that first record in 2000. We put 17 songs on that record because we didn't think we'd be able to make another one. We just thought, well, we got all these songs, we might as well record them and put out this little project. And 10 of the songs were my tunes. But every record after that, I've only done a couple tunes because the students have picked up on the idea and made it their own. And that's been such an awesome, exciting thing. Now, we're going to do From the Depths of Woe, which is Psalm 130, which is on my next page, number 3, I think it is. This one has a girl's echo part, and Elizabeth is going to help lead that. So ladies, if you follow that, I won't make you stand for this one. Yeah, this was interesting. The kid who wrote this, Chris Miner, he lives here in Memphis now. He wrote it kind of real somber, fits the mood. From the depths of woe I raise to thee a voice. But in RUF, people just kept doing it faster and faster. And it got to where it was like this little sing-songy, from the depths of woe I raise to thee. Just didn't sound like the depths of woe. Well, then we had a group up in New York at NYU. They put out a record, and they put it in a minor key. From the depths of woe I raised you. And that was like, all right, that's good. But then when you get to verse 3, and it says, therefore my trust is in the Lord and not in mine own merit, the minor key didn't seem right. So what we do now is we do the minor key for the first 2 verses, and then we shift to the major key. There is like a musical theological point there, of course, which is the melody stays the same, but justification brings a whole new perspective, a whole new context, I suppose, for how life is lived, even in the depths of woe. So that's how we're going to sing it.
From the depths of woe I raise to thee the voice of lamentation. Lord, turn a gracious ear to me and hear my supplication. If thou iniquities dost mark our secret sins and misdeeds dark, oh, who shall stand before thee?
Who shall stand
Oh,
before
who shall stand before thee?
Who shall stand before thee?
To wash away the crimson stain, grace alone availeth. Our works, alas, are all in vain, and much the best life faileth. No man can glory in thy sight, all must alike confess thy might, and live alone by mercy.
Live alone
And live alone by mercy.
Live alone by mercy.
Therefore my trust is in the Lord, not in mine own merit. On him my soul shall rest, his word upholds my fainting spirit. His promised mercy is my fort, my comfort and my sweet support. I wait for it with patience. I wait for it with patience. What though I wait the livelong night till the dawn appearing? My heart still trusteth in his might, it doubteth not nor feareth. Do so ye of Israel, see ye of the Spirit born indeed, and wait till God appeareth. And wait till God appeareth. Though great our sins and sore our woes, His grace much more abounded. His helping love no limit
love that line. I think it's in verse 4. Where is it? Our utmost need it soundeth. Where is that one? Oh, yeah, it's in verse 5. His helping love no limit knows. Our utmost need it soundeth. Do you know what that means? It's like, if it's a nautical expression, sounding the depths. It's the idea of sometimes you don't actually know how great your need is until you look at how great Christ's work was. We're often tempted to flatter ourselves that we just needed a helping hand. But Christ says in his work that you needed something that would redeem you from death and hell. And if you're tempted to forget about, well, you can come at it either way, you see. You can come to understand even more of your need by what Christ did, because he didn't suffer unnecessarily, right? And so even looking at his grace and his goodness, his kindness, is a way to even come to a better understanding of your actual situation. Well, the first hymn that I put a new tune to was this one by Charles Wesley, Arise, My Soul Arise, and it's number 14 in your booklet. I had a friend ask me one time, where did I find this text, Arise, my soul, arise? My friend Lester Ruth is a research professor of worship at Duke University, and he's a Methodist hymn scholar. He's been president of the Charles Wesley Society. He said, I don't know where you found this hymn, Arise, my soul, arise. I consider it one of Charles Wesley's greatest hymn texts, but it hasn't been in a Methodist hymnal for 100 years. I said, well, it's in the Trinity hymnal. It's in the Presbyterian hymnal. And it's a wonderful hymn about communion, actually, about the gospel being preached in a picture by the sacraments. And so it's been in this Presbyterian hymnal. Well, I actually heard it. We tried to sing it at the last Sonship Conference that a guy named Jack Miller did. And I just thought the words had this exuberant joy and confidence that the tune that is put to it in the Trinity didn't seem to match. And, that's, of course, a subjective thing, but I decided to see if I could come up with a tune that I thought fit the mood of the words more, and people have been singing it for a while now. It's a hymn full of gospel confidence, and I think it's worth noting that Charles Wesley didn't always have this kind of gospel confidence. He and his brother John, along with a guy named George Whitefield, had started a little group when they were in college at Oxford called the Holy Club. And they were trying to impress God and maybe make sure that he loved them by doing all kinds of things. Some of them good things, like visiting prisoners and taking care of people when they were sick. But some of them kind of dumb things, like sleeping on a cold stone floor in the middle of winter with no blanket, just to prove to God how much you loved him. And eventually, they even came over here to America, John and Charles, as missionaries of sort, but it was a complete disaster because they themselves weren't converted. But they met some Moravians. I don't know if you ever heard of the Moravians. The Moravians actually are connected to those Hussites that were singing hymns way, way back when. And they were still singing their hymns, and they were full of gospel joy that John and Charles wanted to know about. As a matter of fact, John took to learning German so he could talk to the Moravians and figure out how they had this peace that he didn't have. And they told him, you should read Martin Luther. And so that's what they started doing. They actually get together as college students in an apartment, and they would read out loud Martin Luther's commentary on Galatians, Martin Luther's commentary on Romans. John got converted by one and Charles by the other. This is a hymn about the kind of confidence that comes from the alien righteousness, the righteousness of another imputed to us, given to us as a free gift. And Charles actually used to get letters from people sometimes about how his hymns had helped them. And he would paste the letters in a little notebook. The notebook actually still exists. He got more letters about this hymn than any other hymn that he wrote. People trace their more conversions to this hymn than any other hymn that he wrote. And I think it's because this is one of those hymns that's about basically opening your eyes to see Jesus as more beautiful and believable. I had a friend, Bill Lane, famous New Testament commentator who's with the Lord now, but he used to say, that our prayer whenever we gather for worship is, Jesus, may you become more beautiful and believable to us. And that's what this hymn is about opening up our eyes to see, and then all of life being lived in response to that. Well, you can't sing Arise sitting on your bottoms, so we're going to have to stand for this one. And there's also a ladies' echo part on this, but I suspect some of you probably know this one. I also know sometimes people do this silly little clap. I'd kind of prefer if you didn't. Yeah, it's better than me like stopping the song, right? So I'll just give you a heads up.
Rise, my soul, arise, shake off your guilty fear. Pleading sacrifice on my behalf appear. Before the throne my surety stands. Before the throne my surety stands. My name is written on its head. Arise, my soul, arise, 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 my soul, arise, shake off your guilty fears and rise. He ever lives above for me to intercede. His all redeeming love, His precious blood to plead. His blood atone for every race. His blood atone for every race. It sprinkles now the throne of grace. Arise, 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 my soul, arise, 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 my soul, arise, shake off your guilty fears and rise. By bleeding wounds He bears, received on Calvary, they pour effectual prayers, they strongly plead for me. Forgive him, oh forgive, they cry. Forgive him, oh forgive, they cry. Now let that ransomed sinner die. Arise, 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 my soul, arise, 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 my soul, arise, shake off your guilty fears and rise. My God is reconciled, His pardoning voice I hear. He owns me for His child, I can no longer fear. With confidence I now draw nigh, with confidence I now draw nigh. Father, Abba, Father, cry. Arise, 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 my soul, arise, 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 my soul, arise, shake off your guilty fears and rise.
All right, have a seat. So how many of you have heard the idea, hear this all the time, that Martin Luther wrote his hymns to drinking tunes? Anybody ever heard that? Drinking songs? Yes? A lot of people like use that idea to, defend contemporary music or whatnot. Well, it's actually not true. He did write his hymns to what are called bar tunes, but bar tunes have nothing to do with drinking. The German word bar refers to the musical form AAB, to where you play a melody, you play it again, that's A, and then a new melody is B. So it's a musical form, bar tunes. But there is a guy who put his songs to drinking tunes, to pub tunes, and it's this next guy, William Williams. William Williams wrote hymn number 5, Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah. He was part of a group called the Welsh Calvinistic Methodists. Anybody ever heard of the Welsh Calvinistic Methodists? They actually are quite renowned for their hymn singing. William Williams wrote this one. He wrote all of his hymns in English and in Welsh, which is pretty amazing to be a poet in 2 different languages. And what he would do sometimes is when he would go around Wales on his preaching tours, he'd take his wife with him, and sometimes they would go into a Welsh pub, and she would get up and start to sing a familiar tune, And everybody would stop to listen. She had a beautiful voice, and then they'd realize she was singing one of her husband's hymn texts. Now, the reason that you can do that is because if you go all the way back to a guy named Augustine, Augustine was converted through the preaching of a guy named Ambrose of Milan, okay? So this guy Ambrose in Milan wrote hymns to combat the heresy of Arianism. Arianism, it's still around actually, but Arianism was the idea that Christ wasn't eternal but was the first created being, okay? And so the Arians were actually writing little hymns to spread their heresy, and so Ambrose wrote hymns to combat the heresy. Now, he wrote his hymns in Latin, and there were classical Latin poetic meters. But he didn't write his hymns in classical Latin poetic meters. He wrote them in a more popular Latin meter. That popular Latin meter that Ambrose's hymns were written in ends up eventually becoming the same meter that English ballads are written in. And that's why you can exchange so many classic English hymn texts with English ballad tunes or pub tunes or drinking tunes, because they all are rooted in Ambrose deciding to not write classical meter, high art kinds of hymns, but more common meter, more popular meter. So there's a long history of that. So the point people are usually making when they talk about Luther writing bar tunes is that the hymn tunes have often been rooted in folk music. That's true, even if it's not exactly true that he wrote bar tunes, drinking tunes. And if you ever heard the original rhythm of A Mighty Fortress, you'd realize you could never sing it while you were drinking. You can actually go to Wikipedia, of all places, and hear the original tune. It's called the rhythmic tune. It's the same melody, but the rhythms are very different. The rhythms in A Mighty Fortress and the doxology and a lot of other hymns were straightened out in the 19th century when there was a movement in church music that thought that it would be more scientifically precise and beautiful to have every note have the same duration. So a lot of our hymns, the syncopation got taken out of them. All the times these days, people are like, oh, you can't have hymn tunes with syncopation. Well, there's a reason that the doxology and the Genevan psalm tunes were called Genevan jigs, because they were dance-like. Right? And there's a reason that Martin Luther's original tune for A Mighty Fortress was very syncopated. It's something like, a mighty fortress is our God. It doesn't have bar lines. Bar lines hadn't been invented yet. And so the melody kind of works on its own. You can hear the rhythmic tune at Wikipedia, and it's pretty interesting. It's pretty hard to sing as well. And the New Lutheran Hymnal has the 19th century straightened out tune that you guys all know, and also has that original rhythmic tune. But anyway, back to Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah. This one by William Williams. Capo 2, right? Capo. You guys can sit for this one. All right. One, two, three.
Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, feed me now and evermore. Bread of heaven, Open now the crystal fountain, whence the healing waters flow. Let the flame of drowsy pillar lead me all my journey through. Strong deliverer, be thou still my strength and shield. Strong deliverer, be thou still my strength and shield. When I tread the verge of Jordan, with my anxious fears aside, death of death and hell's destruction, land me safe on Canaan's side. Songs of praises I will ever give to thee. Songs of praises I will ever give to thee. Let me safe on Canaan's side, amid my anxious fears, amid my anxious fears. Let me safe on Canaan's side, amid my anxious fears, amid my anxious fears. Let me safe on Canaan's side, amid my anxious fears, amid my anxious fears. Let me safe on Canaan's side, amid my anxious fears, amid my anxious fears. Goodbye.
Right. I think you guys will know this one. Number 17. I have a friend in Nashville, and we were talking about hymns and hymn stories one time, and he said, you know, I heard this story about this next one, my hope is built on nothing less. It's got this line, I dare not trust the sweetest frame. And I always ask people, do you know what that means? We sing that line all the time, and nobody really knows what it means. He goes, well, what I heard was the guy who wrote this hymn was a carpenter, and he was so proud of his ability to frame his house that he realized that it was really prideful and needed to repent of that, and so he wrote this hymn. I was like, no, that's not what it's about. It has nothing to do with framing a house. A sweet frame refers to kind of an emotional state. John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace, actually has a little book of letters, which I highly commend to you. And he talks in there about how a new Christian, God often gives a new Christian more feelings because they have nothing else to trust in. They don't understand very much about the gospel, so God can give them even more feelings. But eventually, you want to move on, Newton says, from being somebody who is living on their frames. Being one who lives upon their frames is one who is always depending on their emotions and how much they feel God loves them. But sometimes, often, God, in wanting to take us to a deeper level of trust, takes away those feelings sometimes. And that's part of what I meant about a lot of times these students, these covenant kids, they get to college and God is wanting to take them to a deeper level of trust that's more than just their feelings. And yet if they've never learned that that's normal, it really provokes a crisis of faith. So it's important that we sing songs and talk about what does it mean to not live upon a sweet frame. I dare not trust the sweetest frame. That means even when you really feel that God loves you, don't trust in that feeling, because the feelings come and go. But God's love never does. It's a solid rock, right? Because Jesus Christ, in his living and dying in the place of sinners, has secured the smile of God. One of the old Puritans used to say, your feelings are not the sail by which Christ sails. In other words, he is not going up and down in his love for you based on how much you feel it. And it's important. So, sometimes people talk about, they'll go to church and be, oh man, the worship was awesome, by which they usually mean the singing. I was like, well, that's great. I'm glad that you enjoyed the singing, but don't trust sweet frames. We don't despise them. The Puritans used to call these things God's kisses. And it's sweet, but it's not to be trusted in, right? Well, let's stand together and sing this good classic hymn. We're going to sing this one to the traditional tune, so I think you all should probably know this
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. On Christ is solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand. When darkness veils his lovely face, I rest on his unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. On Christ is solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand. His oath, his covenant, his blood support me in the whelming flood. When all around my soul gives way, he then is all my hope and stay. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand. When he shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in him be found, dressed in his righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. On Christ this solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand.
Have a seat. Have a seat. So I said earlier, worship is formative, I guess related to that is this other important idea, is that the songs we sing express the DNA of our church. If we only sing songs that are happy, clappy songs, what that says to somebody who comes into our midst who maybe is really struggling is that this isn't really a place for you. Or if you do want to join in with us, you better pretend that everything's great. And that's an important issue to consider. I think it's so important that we sing songs, like I said, that are honest about struggle. And this next one, I Asked the Lord That I Might Grow, is a good one for that. It's number 6 in your book. It was written by John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace, Let Us Love and Sing and Wonder, so many other of our best hymns, really. And I, for years, just had the words to this hymn, and I would share it with students often who were struggling, wondering, why they weren't feeling God like they wanted. And I've said, well, when you deal with God, you're not dealing with like a vending machine, like where you put in your obedience and out you get this predictable result. You're dealing with a person who wants to conform you to the person of Christ, his image, and suffering is one of his tools that he uses. Now, I think what happens a lot of times is we think of God as the divine pharmacist rather than the divine physician. In other words, we want to write the script ourselves. We want to make the diagnosis, prescribe the medicine, and then ask him to fill it, deliver. But God is the divine physician. He gets to diagnose. He gets to sometimes take a scalpel and make an incision here and there, always for our good. So I love that John Newton wrote this hymn, because a lot of people are like, well, yeah, I guess he understands grace and he understands God, because it's like the most famous hymn ever written. But he also wrote this one, I Asked the Lord That I Might Grow. And this is one of those hymns that, again, I think it just says, hold on. God may be up to something different than you might understand. I tell my students a lot, I think sometimes when suffering comes, we sometimes jump to quick conclusions about what God is doing instead of staying curious. We sometimes jump to quick conclusions. God, you must be doing this for this reason, and I don't like it, therefore I'm not sure I want to follow you anymore. And this is a hymn that I think says, hold on. God might actually have purposes that he hasn't revealed to you. If God is so good, as Tim Keller likes to say, that you can blame him, if he's so great that you can blame him for everything, then isn't it possible that he's so great that he could have reasons beyond what you understand? And this is one of those hymns, I think, that helps us, I think, to slow down and say, wait, God is a person who deals with us as a person. He's good. He can be trusted. But sometimes his ways are rather inscrutable. And it's good to be reminded of that. So that's what this hymn is about. And it's in a different key than I'm about to play it in. I Asked the Lord That I Might Grow, number 6.
I asked the Lord that I might grow in faith and love and every grace, might more of his salvation know and seek more earnestly his face. 'Twas he who taught me thus to pray, and he I trust has answered prayer. But it has been in such a way as almost drove me to despair. That in some favored hour answer my request, and by his love's constraining power, subdue my sins and give me rest. Instead of this, he made me feel the hidden evils of my heart, cast out the angry powers of hell, assault my soul in every part. Yea, more with his own hand he's seen, intent to aggravate my woe, crossed all the fair designs I scheme, cast out my feelings, lay me low. Lord, why is this I trembling cry? Wilt thou pursue thy worm to death? 'Tis in this way, the Lord replied. I answer prayer for grace and faith. These inward trials I employ, from self and pride to set thee free, and break thy schemes of earthly joy, that thou may seek thy all in me. Oh, that thou may seek thy all in me.
Love that will not let me go. Let's stand.
Oh, love that will not let me go, I rest my weary soul in thee. I give thee back the life I owe, that in thine ocean depths its flow may richer, fuller be. Oh, light that fall west all my way, I yield my flickering torch to thee. My heart restores its borrowed ray, that in thy sunshine blazes day, may brighter, fairer be. Oh, joy that seeketh me through pain, I cannot close my heart to thee. I climb the rainbow through the from the ground there blossoms red. Life that shall endless be.
Have a seat. Have a seat. Guess you guys knew that one, huh? You've done that one before. Well, this one may not be one that you've sung a lot in worship, but it's a really important one, I think, for Indelible Grace and my work with students. It's by this lady, Ann Steele. Now, I didn't know who Ann Steele was when I first ran across this hymn. It's number 9, Dear Refuge of My Weary Soul. I remember I was looking through an old hymn book. So when I was in college, okay, I didn't really understand very much about Christianity. I'd been converted in high school, and I was just kind of floating around out there, and I got thrown in charge of, put in charge of leading a Bible study. I was like, oh, I guess I need to figure out what I believe and what I think about things. So I just started going to used bookstores looking for books, and I came across an essay by C.S. Lewis. So it was called On the Reading of Old Books. It's not one of his more famous essays, but it was great for me. Came at just the right time. What he says is, for every new book you read, you should read 2 old books. And so I started looking for old books. And I found they were so much more helpful to me than a lot of the new books, particularly on like what it meant to grow as a Christian, the doctrine of sanctification, some of these sorts of things. So I just had started like looking at all these old books. I never thought I'd get to go to seminary. I thought I would just be like a musician or a recording engineer and maybe an elder and teach a Sunday school class. So I just started buying books. Well, eventually I had picked up a couple old hymnals. I had this one hymnal by a guy named John Rippon, R-I-P-P-O-N. He was an English Baptist guy, pastored a church that later Charles Spurgeon pastored. And Rippon put together a hymn book. I had an 1806 copy of Rippon's hymns. Now, hymn books before the Civil War don't have music in them at all. They just have the words. And the congregation would know a handful of tunes, and they could sing all of the hymns in the book with just a handful of tunes. You could still do that. If you know a tune to Rock of Ages, Come Thou Fount, Amazing Grace, you can sing 3/4 of your English hymn book, because a lot of hymns are in those couple meters, okay? So that's what they would do. So people sometimes are like, well, what was the original tune for Dear Refuge of My Weary Soul? There wasn't an original tune for it, actually. There were a couple tunes in this meter that congregations would sing in that area of England where she lived and when she introduced some of these hymns. Well, I just remember going through this book, and when I came across that title, Dear Refuge of My Weary Soul, I just thought, whoa. Like, I've not heard a song like that on Christian radio, you know? We used to have this billboard for a Christian radio station when you drive 40 west from Nashville to Memphis here, and the little tagline was, safe for the whole family. And I was like, oh, that's the point of Christian music? Is worship safe? I don't know. I was thinking about that Aslan line, you know, he's not safe, but he's good. What if we come to if we just think the point of Christian music is to be safe? I like songs like Dear Refuge of My Weary Soul. Why don't we sing songs like that anymore? Well, Ann Steele's hymns were tremendously popular. Her hymns were everywhere until about 100 years ago. They kind of dropped out of use. But I remember when I found that Dear Refuge of My Weary Soul, just thinking, my gosh, you're allowed to say that in church? You're allowed to sing that? And she wasn't just this weird lady that wrote these dismal hymns. Like, the church leadership put these hymns in the hymn book because they thought these were the kinds of songs that people needed to be singing. And actually, her hymns cross denominational lines quicker than Watts or Wesley because she sings about lament. Isaac Watts didn't sing about lament. He did versions of 133 of 150 psalms, but there were some that he said he just didn't know how to get Christian joy into them. He didn't think lament had a proper place in the Christian life, and so he doesn't do a version of Psalm 88. Do you know how Psalm 88 ends? The NIV, the last line in Psalm 88 is, darkness is my closest friend, and then it ends. It's important that hymn is in, or that psalm is in our Psalter, because sometimes the song ends and the suffering is still going on. Not everything resolves by the end of the song, right? It's important for people to know that. Well, Ann Steele does 35 Psalms versions, and she does Psalm 88. And she has the courage to do it in an honest way. Now, I've been promoting Ann Steele and her work for a long time because her hymns have dropped out of the hymnals, like I said. And there's an elder at a church down in Birmingham, Alex Webster, who actually went looking for Ann Steele's hymns and poems. Because, a lot of her hymns made it into the hymnals, even though they're not in hymnals now. But even if you find a hymnal from 100 years ago that has a lot of her hymns, you might get 20 of them, but she wrote hundreds. And she wrote a bunch of poems. She wrote poems about night terrors. She wrote poems about malaria, because she had malaria. She wrote poems about earthquakes, the Lisbon earthquake. A lot of hymn writers wrote about that. That's a whole little church history thing I'm not going to get into right now. But this guy, Alex Webster, went looking for a copy of her poems and hymns and was like, there's none to be found. So he retypeset all of her hymns and poems and psalms, and you can buy it from Amazon. It's called Refuge of My Weary Soul. But he asked me to write a little preface, which I did, and so we actually have the book in the back. And if you want me to sign it, I will. I'll do anything to get people to read more Ann Steele hymns and poems, because I think they're so good for your soul. Later, actually, the next year, he was like, well, who should I do next? And I was like, well, you've got Ann Steele. Another great hymn writer that I love is Henry Light, who wrote Abide With Me, Praise My Soul, the King of Heaven, Jesus, I My Cross Have Taken. So he did a version of all of Henry Light's hymns as well, and I wrote a little preface for that. We've got those in the back, too, and we're going to sing Abide With Me later. But we're going to sing this one now, Dear Refuge of My Weary Soul. So I always tell people, you can sing along, or you could just let the words kind of wash over you. But these are the kinds of songs I think that we need to be singing more of, songs that are honest about struggle and even take us by the hand and say, here's how you wrestle with God in prayer. I always heard people talk about wrestling with God in prayer, but nobody would ever explain what that meant. This is a great example of what it means to wrestle with God in prayer, to take what God has revealed and wrestle it back with him. She starts out in this place of trust and then kind of loses it in sense. Like verse 2, when gloomy doubts prevail, that's a very strong word. She doesn't say when gloomy doubts nip at my heels, but because I'm a Christian, they never overwhelm me. No, she says when gloomy doubts prevail, and I fear to call thee mine. And then she gets to a place of trust by the end of the hymn, but it's not a triumphalistic, the Christian life is easy kind of trust. It's a fight and a struggle. And I think she teaches us even how to wrestle with God as we sing this hymn.
Dear refuge of my weary soul, on thee when sorrows rise, on thee when waves of trouble roll, my fainting hope relies. To thee I tell each rising grief, for thou alone canst heal. Thy word can bring us sweet relief for every pain I feel. But oh, when gloomy doubts prevail, I fear to call thee mine. The springs of comfort seem to fail, and all my hopes decline. Yet, gracious God, where shall I flee? Thou art my only trust, and still my soul would cleave to thee, though prostrate in the dust. Hast thou not bid me seek thy face? And shall I seek in vain? tree. With humble hope attend thy will, and wait beneath thy feet. Thy mercy seat is open still. Here let my soul retreat. With humble hope attend thy will, and wait beneath thy feet.
Nice, Cooper. Well, let's do something completely different. Get you guys back up again. So some of y'all might know that we've got this RUF at Jackson State down in Jackson, Mississippi. And when the RUF at Jackson State came into being, it's a historic black college, and the question rose, how can they find their voice, add their voice to this thing we were doing in RUF with old hymns set to new music? And we started leading the summer conference RUF worship with Belmont, where I am the campus minister, and Jackson State. And at first it was kind of hard. We're like, okay, they know these songs, we know these songs, but what songs can we all sing together? And the first year we did 2 nights with Belmont leading, 2 nights with Jackson State, and then 1 night where we're like, let's sing it, let's try and put the whole group together and do some songs we can sing together. And everybody loved that night where we sang all together. So we're like, all right, well, let's figure out a way to sing some more songs together. I'd had this text, Heal Us, Emmanuel, for about 10 years. I'd put a tune to it, but I didn't love it. It just didn't feel finished. And so I'd never recorded it. But then the guy who was helping me lead worship at Belmont is a great piano player, musician, and we kind of dug it back out again and said, what if this became a gospel song? Because that was around the time that all those riots and stuff were happening in St. Louis. There was stuff all over, and it just seemed like, the right posture for all of us was not heal them, heal her, heal him, but heal us. And we put it to a gospel tune, and we got the Jackson State RUF group to sing it on the record, and it was really fun. So we're gonna do this one, Heal Us, Emmanuel. Now, I will say this is a good chance for you to sing and sing harmony. It's a good opportunity if you've never tried that before, just this is a good chance to do it. Here's what I always explain to people. White church music is what we call bounded set. Like, here are the rules, and you got to stay within the rules. But black church music is what we call centered set. Like, everything is part of the set because they're tethered to Jesus, tethered to the melody, but you can float around as long as you stay tethered. It's just 2 different ways of exploring some of the God-glorifying potential that God has built into his world with regard to music. No one culture expresses all of the God-glorifying potential in this world with regard to sound. And so this is just a different way to sing, but it's a good one to stand. And I also tell people, if you want to clap on 2 and 4, this is a good one to do that. And if you don't know what that means, wait until somebody who does starts clapping and follow them. It's number 10 in your book, Heal Us, Emmanuel, number 10. 1, 2, 3.
Emmanuel, here we are. We long to feel thy touch. Deep wounded souls to thee we fly. Oh, Savior, hear our cry. Our faith is feeble, we far from you, Lord. Heal us, Emmanuel, here we are. We long to feel thy touch. Deep wounded souls to thee we fly. Oh, Savior, hear our cry. Remember him who once supplied with trembling for relief. Lord, I believe, with tears he cried. Oh, help my unbelief. Heal us, Emmanuel, here we are. We long to feel thy touch. Deep wounded souls to thee we fly. Oh, Savior, hear our cry. To who touched you in the press, and healing virtue stole, was answered, daughter, go in peace. Thy faith has made thee whole. Heal us, Emmanuel, here we are. We long to feel thy touch. Deep wounded souls to thee we fly. Oh, Savior, hear our cry. Like her with hopes and fears we come to touch you if we may. Oh, send us not despairing on. Send none unhealed away. Heal us, Emmanuel, here we are. We long to feel thy touch. Deep wounded souls to thee we fly. Oh, Savior, hear our cry.
We got two more. You ready? So have a seat. So I mentioned this guy, Henry Light, how my friend Alex Webster put together a book of Henry Light's hymns and poems, and I commend those to you as well. What I always love about Henry Light's hymns are the way the father image is a warm, comforting one for him. And the reason that's remarkable is because his own father was really kind of a wretched guy. When Henry was around middle school age, his father abandoned the family, sent his sons to boarding school, and from then on would send letters to his own son and sign them not your father, but your uncle. He He wouldn't let his own son call him father anymore. And yet what's amazing is how in all of his hymns, the father image is still a warm, comforting one. Think of this hymn, Praise My Soul, the King of Heaven. Maybe you know this great verse that says, Father-like, he tends and spares us well, our feeble frame he knows. In his hands he gently bears us, rescues us from all our foes. This one we're going to sing, Abide with Me. I'm not sure where it is in the book. It's probably near the back. Number 7? Oh, well, it's not near the back. That's awesome. 7. Abide with Me. He wrote near the end of his life. Not really on his deathbed. Sometimes you hear a story a little over-dramatized about how it was on his deathbed. But it was near the end of his life. He was suffering with tuberculosis, and he had to keep going to France to try to get better for his health and then go back again. And on his last trip over to France, he gave the final copy of this hymn to a relative and didn't make it back to England. He died in Nice and is buried over there, actually. But this one, I love this one, Abide with Me. This is one of those people are like, well, why did you change the original tune? This is an interesting one because the original tune for this hymn was the one written by Henry Light himself that was used for about 20 years, and it was sung at his own funeral. So you would think that would be the tune that people would keep singing, except about 20 years after Henry Light wrote his hymn with his tune, Monk, who is a very famous church music guy, he put together a hymnal called Hymns Ancient and Modern. He was the musical editor for that book. Very important Anglican book, came out in the late 1800s, and he composed a new tune for this hymn, and that's the tune that everybody thinks of as the original tune. That's the tune they sing in England. It's the tune they sing at soccer matches. It's the hymn they sang at Princess Di's funeral. It's the national hymn of England. Justin Smith, who wrote this tune that we sing, didn't even know that because so many of my students grow up in churches not singing hymns at all. And they just kind of look through these hymn books and they find these old texts not even knowing that some people are still singing them. So if we ever retuned one of your favorite hymns, it probably wasn't intentional. It probably was the fact that we found it in a different source and weren't singing it in any of the kind of churches that we grew up in, which is its own problem, I suppose. But we're going to sing Abide With Me, and then we're going to do on Jordan's Stormy Banks, because that's always a good one to end on.
Abide with me, fast falls the eventide, the darkness deepens. Lord, with me abide, when other helpers fail and comforts flee. Help of the helpless, abide with me. Thou on my head in early youth didst smile, and though rebellious and perverse meanwhile, thou hast not left me, though I oft left thee. Unto the close, Lord, abide with me. I need thy presence every passing out. What but thy grace can foil the tempter's power? Who like thyself my guide and stay can be? Through cloud and sunshine, abide with me. I fear no foe, with thee at have no weight. Tears lose their bitterness. Where is thy sting, death? Where grave thy victory? I triumph still. Abide with me. Hold thou thy cross before thy closing eyes. Shine through the gloom and point me to the skies. As morning breaks and earth's faint shadows flee, in life and death, Lord, abide with me. In life and death, Lord, abide with me.
Awesome. You guys have been awesome. Give a warm thank you to Eric, mandolin, pedal steel, Elizabeth helping us out on the vocals, and Carl back here on the bass. It's always fun to pick up musicians, good musicians, where we go. Makes for a special night. We're going to sing this last one. This is kind of our traditional one to sing last for a long time. That's better. It's number 13. On Jordan's stormy banks. It's good to sing about the hope of heaven. The hope of heaven for Christians is not kind of a vague, wishful thinking. It's a solid, secured reality because of the life and death of Jesus. And maybe you've heard of this idea that gets thrown around. It's a good way of putting it, that we live in between the already and the not yet. Right? Already Christ has come and put death to death, but not yet do we see it fully manifest. Not yet do we see the consummation, all things made new. So we live in the middle, in between the already and the not yet. But I think that sometimes the right now makes it hard to believe that the already actually happened and that the not yet ever will. So it's good to sing songs that remind us of our future and our hope. And I like this one in particular because it speaks of heaven, the new heavens and the new earth in like visual, visceral terms, not just some disembodied ethereal floating on a cloud, because that's not what we look forward to. We look forward to the new heavens and the new earth and all things being made new. This is also one of those that has a girl echo part. So Elizabeth will lead in that, and everybody stand.
Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wishful eye to Canaan's fair and happy land, where my possessions lie. All o'er those wide extended plains shines one shall I see my Father's face, and in his bosom rest. Well, I am bound, I am bound, I am bound for the promised land. I am bound, I am bound, I am bound for the promised land. I am bound,
I am bound for the promised land.
I am bound,
I am bound, I am bound for the promised land.
Will's going to come close us in prayer.
This is one of my favorite prayers, from the Book of Common Prayer about the fellowship of the saints, which I feel like we really have a kind of special perspective on a night like tonight where we sing all sorts of songs by the saints that's gone before us. So let's pray together. O God, you have brought us near to an innumerable company of angels and to the spirits of just men made perfect. Grant us during our earthly pilgrimage to abide in their fellowship, and in our heavenly country to become partakers of their joy. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Amen. Well, thanks again so much for everyone for coming. Kevin and Cooper will be out there at the table. And this is St. Patrick. If you have any questions, come see me. Thanks again. Have a great night.